How's it going everyone? David from dodmedia, home of tips, tutorials, gear reviews and monthly giveaways for filmmakers and photographers. Today I'm going to be telling you about 5 tips that I would strongly recommend for anyone who is interested in editing, for anyone who's interested in becoming a better editor and saving time while you're editing. 5 tips that I think are vital for that. So tip number 1, learn to use Ripple Edit. Now, as I understand it, Final Cut users automatically have some kind of Ripple Edit by using that magnetic timeline where if you take something out, everything else will squish back together to fill that space, or if you add something, everything will shift aside to accommodate it. I think that's how it works. But Premiere Pro doesn't work that way. Premiere Pro, everything is kind of stuck where it is. So on the timeline, if I was to make 2 cuts there and then delete that clip, everything else stays where it is, nothing moves around. However, if I bring that clip back, select it, and hit Alt Backspace, it'll actually measure the length of that clip that we deleted in frames and then shift everything to the right of that, back that number of frames. Now, the reason that I think this is a huge time saver is because it means that you don't get blank spaces in your edit. You don't get gaps that you forget about until you export it and you're playing it through. And that's only then that you find that you've actually missed a whole portion in your edit, in your timeline, and that it's just black screen. So Ripple Edit's massive time saver. This chair is just... I need a new chair, don't I? All right, tip number 2 is actually about keyboard shortcuts, but more specifically mapping keyboard shortcuts to additional buttons and controllers that you might have. For example, I have this Logitech mouse. It's the M705. Brilliant mouse, absolutely wonderful. Love using it. I've been using it every day for the past 2.5 years. Now, this mouse is a basic mouse. It's not like a gaming mouse where it's got absolutely tons of different buttons and features, and if you have one of them, then great. I didn't actually want one of them because I find that I get a little bit lost on what I'm pressing and I don't want to look at the mouse to know what I'm pressing. However, what this mouse has is a button, which is this whole section here where my thumb lives. And that's really handy because I can map a keyboard command straight to the click of that button. And so you're able to map one of the functions that you use the most often onto the one click of the button instead of having to reach your fingers across multiple keys to do a keyboard shortcut. So I thought, what is the keyboard shortcut that I use the most? And to be honest, as an editor, the thing I do the most is cutting. So using Command or Control K to slice whatever layer is active where the playhead is. That is probably the tool that I use the most in Premiere Pro. And so I've mapped this button to be Control K on the PC, it would be Command K on a Mac. And so it means that anywhere in the timeline, I can just click that and it will slice. I don't have to go Command Control K. I can just click, click, cut, lovely. It's just cutting everywhere. And as I say, it'll only cut the layers that are active, so the layers that have this V1, V2, V3 highlighted in blue. And it doesn't have to be a mouse, it could be a keyboard that has additional custom buttons. It could be control units, for example, the palette gear unit I know is compatible with Premiere Pro, so you can map certain commands to buttons, dials and faders there, and that just looks awesome. And it's really just all designed to save you time. Alright, the next thing is one that will save you lots of frustration down the line, especially if you're working with a client and you're producing multiple versions of something because they're asking for changes, is create duplicates of your sequences for next versions. Let's say that this here is version 1, my rough cut, and I send it off to the client and they come back with feedback. Now, I'd be tempted to just start editing in this timeline and start making the changes they've asked for, even if they're tiny changes. But the problem is then, if for some reason they want to backtrack and say, actually no, let's go back to the drawing board on that rough cut and, you know, make some changes from that rough cut, ignore all the changes we already asked you to make, well then you're in a bit of a pickle because you don't have a duplicate of that timeline, that edit as you had it, and you've already saved over the previous one that you had. So to go back to that, you're just gonna have to spend more time editing backwards essentially to get back to where you were. However, if you just select your sequence, right click and come up to duplicate, it'll duplicate your sequence for you. Or even faster than that, just select your sequence, hit Command or Control C, Command or Control V, and it'll create a copy of it, which means that you can then go into that, call that, I don't know, version 2, and start editing in version 2. That way, any changes that you make to version 2 are strictly in version 2 version 1 remains as it was. And trust me, it's very easy to forget to do this. It's very easy to get that feedback from the client and just start cutting away in the current timeline that you're in, the current sequence that you're in. But if you can force yourself to try and develop that habit of creating a new sequence when you have a new edit, a new series of edits to make on your timeline, it will save your life, or at least, several hours in an evening. So yeah, duplicate your sequences. All right, tip number 4 is actually about the hardware in your computer and how you're storing your footage. So the main thing that I can suggest is if you're using a conventional hard drive which spins a spinning disk, get rid of it. Switch to a solid state system. A solid state drive is just phenomenally faster than a hard drive disk. It's a fact. Whether you're going through a USB 3 connection or it's just straight into your motherboard with a SATA 3 connection, it doesn't matter, it's just gonna be so much faster. And the reason that it's good to edit from SSDs, solid state drives, is that it decreases the chance that the bottleneck is with your footage, with your drive. Ideally, you want the bottleneck in your whole system to be your processor, because your processor is going to be doing a lot of work while it's looking through Premiere Pro, figuring out what it is that Premiere Pro wants it to do, what it wants it to process. You want your processor to be working as hard as it can without being idle, without waiting to receive information from hard drives. You see so many machines that people buy that have fantastic processors in them, and yet the storage is just, it's lacking. It's so slow. They're using a conventional HDD, or they have everything running off of their root drive, their C drive, or their Mac HD drive, instead of using external or additional internal SSD drives. The reason that I'm able to edit 8K footage on this machine is that I don't have any bottlenecks with my storage. I have all of my system installed on one SSD on the C drive, which has my OS, so Windows 10. I have all of my programs that are installed on there, so the whole Adobe suite. It's all installed on that one SSD. But then all of my footage goes on another SSD. Then I have another SSD in there, which is for cache and data files that are generated as sort of temporary files and reference files by Premiere, by After Effects, by Lightroom. And then I have a final SSD which is used for exports. And all of this is plugged straight into the motherboard, which means that my bottlenecks are really reduced. It means that the processor can handle a lot more data thrown at it at the same time. Anyway, this is getting really long. So yeah, if you can try and work from an SSD drive, you will see a world of difference. Okay, and the final tip, tip number 5, similar to creating duplicates of your sequences so that you have versions of it. The best tip that I can give you for speeding up your process when you're setting up a new project in Premiere Pro is to actually duplicate the project file. Instead of loading up Premiere Pro, creating a new project, and then having a completely blank, empty project. So create yourself a template file that you can use to sort of hack that setup time so that you don't have to waste that, say, 20 minutes setting up a project. You can find that tutorial just up there right now, I think, if you click on it there. There's also a template file that's on my Selfie store if you want to buy that. It has an initial audio mix already set up for you. It has all the bins that you might require for your footage, for your branding, for your music, for your audio, for adjustment layers, for sequences that are already all laid out. It's got everything there that you might need. If you're interested, the link is in the description. So by creating a template file that you can copy for a new project, you can already have your audio mix, you can already have your sequences, you can already have your bins, you can already have everything ready to populate with your footage. You don't have to waste time setting that up every single time. So those are my 5 tips for becoming a faster editor. Let me know in the comments if you found this useful, give it a thumbs up if you liked what you saw, and consider hitting that subscribe button to get more videos from me at dodmedia. As I said in the beginning, it's tips and tutorials for filmmakers and photographers. I also do occasional gear reviews when I think it's something that filmmakers and photographers would really benefit from. And I also run a monthly giveaway because giving away stuff is cool. All right, see you in the next video. Cheers.